Good evening. My name is Katrina, and I am the events coordinator for the Toadstool Bookshop in Keene. And this evening, the Toadstool Bookshops in Keene, Peterborough, and Nashua, are all thrilled to have Archer Mayer joining us for a live online Zoom event. Folks, I just ask that for the time being, you keep your cameras off and your mics muted. We are going to have times for questions, or you can always ask a question in the chat feature. And come towards the end of Archer's talk, we will start getting questions. We can have more of a discussion base, kind of like we would in store. For the time being, though, I'm going to let Archer take it away. Folks, if you guys would like a copy of the book, please call us at any one of our stores or go to www.toadbooks.com and you can get it on there. Now I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to mute myself and shut off my camera. Archer, please take it away.
Okay, will do. Thank you, Katrina, and welcome everybody. It's sort of a wonderful format. As I was pointing out to Katrina, I was swinging a hammer 2 minutes ago on top of a ladder. So, the conveniences of this are there, but I would so much more prefer to see you all in person. So I'll look forward to when all this stuff is behind us and we can resume where we once knew one another. I take it quite a few of you have seen my song and dance before. I am now out with the Orphan's Guilt, number 31 in Joe Gunther's adventures. And I thoroughly hope you enjoy it, to the point, as usual, of buying 5 copies, even if you don't need them. Much appreciated, of course. Keep the artist going. And I will break the ice by describing a little bit about what Orphan's Guilt concerns itself with. But as always, this hour is your hour. So as I'm babbling on, start gathering together your questions, because that's what's going to see us through to the end. But until that moment, the Orphan's Guilt begins, as do many of my books, with a very mundane, sort of regular type activity. In this situation, it's a police officer for the state police in this instance, pulling over a driver for erratic conduct, and he finds that the guy is drunk. Very pleasant fellow. But no big deal, just a routine DWI. And this, of course, reflects my own background as a now retired police officer. And when I did uniform patrol work, I was working in Bellows Falls, Vermont, and I would do this on a regular basis. And so I thought, okay, let's start with regular police work and then go forth. Because one of the intriguing things for me has always been what happens after such an encounter. You guys, we all go to dinner parties or just go out and we bump into new people and we go, wow, this conversation is really fun and I'm having a good time. And you begin to wonder a little bit about that person that's caught your interest. Where are they from? What do they do? What's their background? But before you can really sort of roll your sleeves and get to it, I don't know, someone declares a pandemic and you all have to go home, and you don't catch that person's name or anything else, and you never see him again, and you're left with this sort of sense of, gee, that's too bad. That not often you really click with someone, and this was a missed opportunity. So it was sort of that logic with which I began the book. And indeed, the bonding between these two people creates between the trooper who brings the drunk driver into the barracks for processing, as they say, and that involves paperwork and fingerprints and something called a data master they blow into, and there are a bunch of questions they ask, do you want a blood test or not, and blah blah blah. And then at the tail end of an hour or 2 or 3 or however long this whole process takes, they find a way to get the drunk driver back home. Obviously, he can't use his own car, and that's the end of the encounter. And thus it is with these two. But as I just described, it's a complex process. And when I used to conduct the process, we were almost paranoid as we filled in the paperwork, because if you make a single mistake, if you omit a single little box on that form, if you even do things out of order sometimes, or ask the wrong question, the prosecutor down the line will say, well, I can't do anything with this. You're going to have to cut him loose, and there will be no charges leveled against this guy who is absolutely driving intoxicated, but you screwed up on the paperwork because you didn't check off this box. It's an onerous situation, especially for an emergency worker whose pager is never off. And if the cop processing the drunk driver gets interrupted, well, then he's got to remember where was he and what's the timing, and all this kind of stuff gets rather convoluted. And I have gone on too much, I know. But that's chapter 1, and it sets the pace. Because this fella hires a lawyer to see if he can get out from under the drunk driving charge, because he's actually a committed alcoholic, and he comes from a very unhappy background, and he has just lost, in effect, the love of his life, who was his little brother, who was comatose for all intents and purposes. And this guy took care of him hand and foot, day in and day out, year in and year out. And everyone subsequently interviewed says that this guy, no wonder he occasionally dove into alcohol, because he had no life left. But the life that he gave his little brother was as perfect as anyone in that condition could enjoy. He was a saint among men. All right, so you've got this thing going. And then in the middle of it all, right at the beginning of the book, he disappears. Now, I don't happen to have a smartphone. I don't own one. Everyone else around me does. And I watch all of you smartphone users with fascination because of your devotion to this device and its control over much of your lives. And I find this quite intriguing, being a social anthropologist and a viewer of human behavior and whatnot. So how do you disappear? Well, you know, you've got credit cards, you've got the cell phone, you've got computers, you got tablets, you have friends and colleagues, you have workplaces, you've got, you know, family members. This fellow has none of that, and he simply vanishes. There's nobody at home. His brother is dead, so the house is empty. He doesn't use his credit cards, so they're inert. There is no smartphone to consult. He disappears. Well, in the meantime, they look at, just by coincidence, just another happenstance, kind of like pulling someone over for drunk driving. They discover that the young man may not have died of natural causes. Maybe he didn't die because of the thing that put him in a coma. Maybe the thing that put him in a coma can in fact be qualified as a homicide. Well, once again, welcome to my world, because I used to work cases like that when I did plainclothes work, once I got out of uniform. And of course, as you know, I'm still very active as a medical examiner. In fact, I had 9 cases last week, so it was a very busy week. So it's a very ongoing process for me. And indeed, and this is cheating a little bit, I did have a case of a young person who was rendered, basically in a comatose state from birth. And I had to identify exactly what the causation was of that, because you can't just make assumptions because someone says, oh, they're born that way. you better do your homework and make sure that that person was in fact born that way or rendered thus by the hand of another. Because if that's true, then you've got a criminal investigation to conduct. So I thought that combining these interesting and strange things would be the construction of the perfect portal to bring us back into history. And that's what we do in the Orphan's Guilt. We go back to find out, where did this drunk driver come from? What happened to his little brother, who's 28 years old by the time he dies? And thus begins the story. But let's not forget that the fella disappeared. Now, the interesting part there is, of course, in the absence of someone who may or may not be a suspect, and remember, you always look first to the family in some sort of domestic mishap of this nature. And the parents are all dead, and so we got no one else to go to. We only have the brother. So the challenge for the police would have been normally, okay, let's bring in the brother now that he's dried out, and we'll interrogate him. But he's gone. So who is there left to interrogate? Ghosts, memories, past history. And that's the story. This is an investigation done by Sally Kravitz, because there's a private eye aspect, by Rachel Reiling, because obviously this is an interesting newspaper story. And the guy's lawyer is no fool, so he actually gets the media involved so that he can sort of make his case for getting this guy out from under the drunk driving charge more easy or easier. And Joe Gunther and VBI, because it's a homicide now. And they go on and they go back and they work more or less together, and they discover the roots of the type of people I was alluding to earlier, the people you meet, the people who intrigue you, people who catch your interest, but about whom you know very little. So this is my opportunity given to you in Orphan's Guilt to take a trip that oftentimes you've been denied by circumstance or happenstance. So I hope you enjoy it. The beautiful thing is that the driver, the drunk driver, remember him, everyone else does. Well, of course, he's been blamed for everything in his absence, including possibly being his own brother's murderer. Well, he resurfaces at the very tail end of the book, and I won't give you the details about that, but suffice it to say that the circle is not broken, and the continuum has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It was great fun to write. I had a real ball. I interviewed lawyers to find out, okay, all right, you've got an ironclad DWI case. The guy is a 3-time loser. He's going, to lose his license forever and maybe go to jail for a long, long time. And so, how can we conjure something up? And the lawyer I consulted used to be a prosecutor, so I had the best of both worlds there, etc. I have most of this takes place, I guess, in sort of the general Windham County area, which is Brattleboro and Putney and places like that in the southeast corner of the state. But a little bit of it also takes place elsewhere in Vermont. So as usual, I travel us around so that you can enjoy the state for the bucolic wonders it has to offer. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. As I promised, I now will lapse into silence, I hope for a very short period of time, and we can start a conversation, which is what I usually enjoy doing, based on your questions. So who's got a question?
Folks, if anybody does have a question, feel free to use the chat feature, and I'll read that right out loud. Archer, I do have a question.
Yes.
Why stay in Vermont? I personally see like a lot of magic in northern New England, and I wouldn't want to tell a story anywhere else. But have you ever been tempted to take Joe Gunther away from the Green Mountain State?
Well, of course, I do now and then. I have taken him to Canada several times, to various locales. I've taken him to Chicago, New York, Boston. The book I've just finished writing and the one I should be editing, but I'm having too much fun doing this, is in Rhode Island. But you're absolutely right. I consider place a sort of a crucial fundament of most of our personalities. If, like me, you were brought up on the road and never had, I actually never even had a national flag. My father moved out of the country and I followed along. I'm the bottom of 6 kids. And so we Canada and South America and Europe and several places, and it was quite exotic and in many times quite magical. I learned several languages. I was exposed to people whom I otherwise never would have met. But I became oddly dispossessed. I didn't belong anywhere. I didn't belong to any culture or any language for that matter. When I came back to the United States, I spoke very rough English. It wasn't a natural language to me. And so after I had habituated and gone to college and done all that good stuff and a few early jobs, and that's one thing, I've had dozens of jobs, I all of a sudden realized in the late 1970s that I had it. I didn't play well with others. I'm not a good employee of an organization. I'm too restless. I'm too cranky, I guess. Ergo Willie Kunkel, we know where he comes from. He's much more me than Joe Gunther. And so I escaped to Vermont because it had this wonderful commingling of reputations. You could speak your mind. It was New England. My father is an old New Englander. I come from old New England stock on my father's side. And it also only had 25 people living in it, so I would be able to get to know them all relatively quickly. And that's from the governor down to the guy who lived under the bridge. And I would, my intention, funnily enough, Katrina, was not murder mysteries. I actually don't care too much about murder mysteries. What I care about is why do you do the things you do? And when I was an investigator, I did sex crimes against kids. There's a huge forum there where you ask yourself, good Lord, what was going on in your mind that you perpetrated such an act on a child or someone elderly or just another sentient human being? Because I did all kinds of cases.
Right.
And of course, medical examiner, same thing. I've now been doing that for 18 years, believe it or not. I also did EMS for 25 years and firefighting, National Ski Patrol. All these things are based on encountering people in crisis and not just setting that crisis back on track, but finding out about what makes these people tick. So Vermont sort of became this laboratory and a highly pertinent and relevant environment for me to set forth doing what I'd wanted to do from the get-go, which was to be of use to my fellow human being on one side, and to tell stories about similarly motivated people on the other. And of course, that's the Vermont Bureau of Investigation and my heroes. And they are less Sherlock Holmes types who are terribly brainy, but not very kind. These guys, they make mistakes. I actually very carefully set out to have them make mistakes in exchange for their humanity. Even Willie Kunkel, who is just one cranky dude. But one of the things that fouls him up is his humanity, his heart. One of the reasons he's so angry is because he probably once had faith and he feels that's been kicked around as much as it has been. So as you can see, this may not be exactly what you asked, but I
That's all
uncorked
right.
you get everything in the bottle.
Yeah.
So the motivation of this whole series to me was uh, not just let's write a book, make a lot of money, and then run away and write other books that take place elsewhere. What I discovered was that I had begun a never-ending process. Call each book of a single chapter, if you will, in this book that won't end. And the book that won't end is simply um, a portrait of a place, of a culture, of a people. I happen to live in Vermont, so I'm writing about Vermont, and I therefore I'm not doing this for commercial reasons. I'm doing this almost for therapeutic reasons for my own good. I have baggage like everybody else has baggage, and analyzing and manipulating and displaying Joe Gunther's journey through life is one way for me to settle things in my head and to share them with you, because I think a lot of what they go through is what all my readers go through or have gone through, a little less melodramatically. Obviously, I have to have, good guys, bad guys, and car chases and gunplay, but I try not to do that too terribly much. Actually, I'm not a huge action writer. So that's sort of why I write in Vermont and haven't left, is because it still has so much to offer me.
That's awesome. I do have a few questions
Oh,
from
good.
attendees. The first is from, excuse me, I lost my place. First is from Kathy, who asks, how old is Joe Gunther? Does he age as the series ages? Has he found the fountain of youth in Vermont?
Well, he clearly has. if you read the entire series, you'll find some fairly quirky historical references as to Joe's past life, which probably would make him about 93 years old. So obviously, no, it ain't chronological. What I've done is I've stolen a page from other far better known writers, Sherlock Holmes and the Travis McGee series, and Ross McDonald, who wrote the Lou Archer investigator series, and none of these people age.
Right.
They live their lives from day to day, and we kind of like I do, and I have to frankly admit I'm a little startled sometimes to catch sight of myself in the mirror and go, "Good God, man, you're getting on in years." But I don't feel that way. As I referenced, I was on a ladder with a hammer moments ago. So you just do what you need to do. In a funny kind of way, I guess I've come to think of Joe Gunther as sort of aging to such a slow extent that the entire series of books could take place in a single year. I know that that's a paradox, and I know it doesn't make any sense since it started in 1988, damn near before there were computers. And now, of course, he runs around with, God forbid, a smartphone, which he doesn't enjoy any more than I do. But at least he has one, which is more than I got. So, he is slightly reflective of modernity. But I can absolutely, Kathy, I empathize, because if you think it's hard to figure out how old Joe is, imagine what it's like when you write him. So I just gave up all caution and figured that the only caveat I can give you is don't do the math.
I think that's a fair solution. Ronnie asks, Grafton made it to Y. How many characters are in your alphabet? Are you ever tempted to furlough Gunther and head off in a different direction? Or as you say, are you having too much fun?
I am having too much fun, and I think that Sue Grafton, who is a lovely woman, I met her many years ago when we were both starting out. We had the same agent, and she came up with a fabulous formula. And unfortunately, since she started a little longer in the tooth than I did, she ran out of game before she could hit X. She did hit X, Z. And wrap it up. well, good thing I didn't do that. Much as I envied her the popularity of the ABC and the fact that librarians and bookstores drove themselves crazy because they couldn't stand not having a piece of the alphabet, even if it didn't sell particularly well, because they're compulsive. They like all the letters there, and I wasn't clever enough to come up with that. But in a funny kind of way, what would I be doing now with book 31? Okay, would I be doing Greek letters now? I mean, so it's like the hurricane season. They've run out of names, and now they're speaking in tongues. So I guess I'm sort of lucky that way. But there was a time when I thought, oh, I'll write a few of these books. I always knew I wanted to write a series. That I did know. But 30, I mean, I just finished the 32nd. I'm editing it as I pointed out. Right now I'm calling it Marked Man, and that should be out next fall. And I think it's terrific. Whether it is or not is secondary to the fact that that's a reflection of my enjoyment. I mean, I'm having a real kick doing these books, and therefore I'd have to ask myself what the motivation was to abandon Joe and do something else. Well, the motivations could be twofold. One is that I'm bored. Clearly, I'm not. And the other is that I think I could make a bucket load more money. Well, I guess, I suppose I could, because I could write the types of book that I don't even like to read, and make lots of money. But after a while, thank God I was born the way I was, where money was just, it was like eating. I eat to get through the day. I eat because I need to survive. And money is something I need to pay bills. But I don't, I still drive a secondhand truck. I do all my own carpentry. They aren't particularly interesting to me, and they certainly aren't motivators. And that's a good thing if you're a writer, because the average income of a writer ain't much. And I have my other occupations, like the death investigating job, which is not a full-time job,
Right.
But it does help pay the bills immeasurably, and it gets me out of the house and helps me a lot with the plots.
Yeah. Someone, Victoria, has asked, how did you pick the name Gunther? Is it a reference to anything local?
Oh, how wonderful! Yes, it's not. I did pick it carefully, but not in homage to another human being. I picked it because of its melting pot reflection.
Yeah.
What I wanted to do was to write a series about a regular guy. Now, of course, Joe Gunther is not a regular guy. He's almost superhuman because he's so thoughtful, so considerate, so decent, so filled with integrity and motivated by all of these factors that most of us, certainly I, can only aspire to. And when people say, "Are you really Joe Gunther?" I burst out laughing and said, "Only in my wildest dreams." You see, he's a real Boy Scout. And I set out, nevertheless, to write about a Boy Scout who did not jump buildings in a single leap and do Superman stuff. In fact, I very much on purpose made sure that in quite a few of the first books, I have him screw up. I have him commit errors above and beyond just, stubbing his toe. These are things that screw up cases, that he really has to make amends and atone for. It was very important to me that he maintain his feet of clay, because he was a regular Joe, but he wasn't a regular guy, and so I'm tiptoeing along this line. So the name Gunther was designed to lie on the ground and stay there. It was not supposed to be sexy. It was not supposed to be uh, you know, prompt you to visions of heroicism. In fact, roughly at the time that I created Joe Gunther, I think actually the timing is slightly off, but just to show the kind of world we live in, there was a TV program called Remington Steele that had actors now who are in old folks' homes, but in those days they were terribly buff and they ran very well and they wore very nice clothes and all the rest of it, and they were super investigators. But Remington Steele, now there's a name. And it was sort of against that image. Because remember, Remington Steele actually didn't exist. The woman who created the detective agency named the detective agency Remington Steele Agency because she thought the name would attract people. Well, I chose Joe Gunther to not attract people. He was going to sneak up on you with his decency. So that was the motivation.
That's
Bet you didn't expect that answer.
no, but I kind of really enjoy that though, because I think it speaks to the humanness of your writing and of all of the characters that you write about. They are all very much people that we could encounter around here in this part of the world, and I just think that's incredible. She also asks, have you been approached or considered selling the series for TV or movies?
Oh, yes, it comes up. I'm under contract right now, in fact.
Really?
Well, yes, but control yourself because, this is, on being under contract is fabulous news, and we keep our fingers and toes crossed.
Right.
But these are COVID times. Hollywood is taking a kick right in the ankles. And so we got a phone call my wife Margot and I got a phone call. She's the business end. She's actually the brains of the outfit. But we got a phone call from the Hollywood guy, and he said, well, you've heard about what's been going on in Hollywood. And indeed, we had a partner, and we were, putting together a series, a Joe Gunther series. But the partner ran out of money and it all fell apart. And he said, but the reason for the phone call is less to inform you of that and more to tell you that we're still keenly interested, we're still very much engaged, and we're looking for another partner now that this guy has given up the ghost. So don't despair, keep those fingers and toes crossed, and hope springs eternal. So, hey, I think it would be great. Part of my 400 earlier jobs was as a photographer, and oftentimes, and I love movies. I'm a movie nut, old movie nut, not so much the modern stuff, although, that's fine too. But I think visually, and when I write a book, I don't do cue cards, I don't do reams of notes and all that stuff. I do a lot of interviews, I do a lot of research, and I park it in there. And then I write visually from there on. I begin to unfold a movie in my head, which I argue is what you guys do as readers. I mean, that's one of the reasons that you forget that you're flipping through pages, is because this movie that I have given you through words ignites in your head, and you see the images, and you can visualize things that I don't even describe. Because you're all creative. That's what readers are. And so, I love the idea of Joe Gunther actually making it into the movies. Now, do I think, that they would probably end up with a Joe Gunther that doesn't even vaguely resemble what I have in my mind? Sure. But I've got the books. So I've already had my first swing, so if they come up with a completely different Joe Gunther, well, that's their creative juice. And I wish them all the energy in that department that they can conjure up, because I've got mine and they've got theirs. And obviously I hope they do a good job. We don't want them to louse it up. Right. But when people say to me, for example, oh, let's make Danny DeVito Joe Gunther. Now, everyone around me is going, oh, terrible idea. And I'm the only guy saying, cool, why not? I mean, if that's your creative image and that will give you the juice and the excitement with which you want to go forth, do it.
She also asks, what is still to be explored or discovered about Gunther?
Oh, a lot and nothing. That's one of the beauties is, again, to emphasize what I said earlier, in many ways, it's up to you guys as to what you get out of Joe Gunther. I leave him curiously tabula rasa. I don't go into all sorts of melodramatic ghosts of the past. We know he has a brother. We know he has a mom. We know that he came from a farming family and that his dad died a long time ago, that he was a taciturn fellow. That's pretty humble pie. What did he have? Pets? Did he have terrible adventures in school? We don't know anything about that, and quite on purpose. Now, with Willie Kunkel, who's a far more complicated and a darker fellow, I'll go into somewhat more detail because I get that feedback from my readers. But in many ways, I don't think I'll be doing that too terribly much. And as a result, 30 books later, I don't get too tangled up with the feeling that, oh my God, will I ever leave the poor guy alone? Funnily enough, I've never really totally exercised him, so you don't know all that much, more or less about him 30 books later than you did when you first met him. Right. And that's by design.
Cecile asks, what is your writing schedule like? Do you do a certain number of hours per day? Things like that.
It's chaos, complete chaos. I'll show you actually, just to demonstrate how close it is to me at all times. That is a pager. Many people consider this thing an antique because, like I mentioned, we all live with these smartphones. I don't, and the pager works wherever the smartphone doesn't. But the pager goes off all the time. Now, as an EMT, as a firefighter, as a police officer, and now as a death investigator for the state, I've always had pagers. I've sometimes, at my peak, had 3 pagers, all parked next to each other on my belt. So, answering the question of what is my normal writing routine, once I get through all the pager demands, what's left with the day, I'll do some writing. So I'll write, in the afternoon, I'll write in the middle of the night. I'll write whenever I get an opportunity to write. And that's fine with me because what am I writing about? I'm writing about other people who have pagers. So in a funny kind of way, all of this washes each other's hands. And now, all right, there are those days where, last week, for example, I had 9 cases. So that, and when they're really bad, they'll run for 6 hours. So that's a lot of casework in a single week. And you got to drive out and see them, and you go out in the middle of the night or the middle of the day and all the rest of it. And then you have to write all the reports, get all this stuff squared away in a nice legal fashion. You get tired, you get cranky, you have other things you need to do, like stand on a ladder with a hammer. Right. You have other life's obligations, you got bills to pay. So all of that leads to a crowded life, and the writing is just one part of it. So, but rest assured that no, I do not have a little fireplace and a tweed outfit and imported beer that I sip delicately as I write from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Nah, it never happens. I write when I can. I fit it in how I can. And it's worked all these decades. So I don't think I'll break this non-habit.
Susan asks, were you writing before the Gunther series, and what was your motivation to write the Joe Gunther series?
I wrote history books. I'm a trained historian. And the reason that I used to do that was because I was brought up on the road and in Europe and South America and various other places. My mother's from Argentina. So there was that sense. I was coming back to the US. I knew I would live in the US. And I didn't know much about it. And as you may have discovered by now, I am driven by curiosity. I'm one of the nosiest people you'll ever meet. And there's nothing that I couldn't learn more about. So here I am in this country, not speaking the language particularly well, knowing that this is going to be my home. I got to get cracking. So I made myself a historian in college. That was my major. And then I hit the road and sold myself as a historian to individuals. I was a freelance historian, believe it or not. I actually haven't worked for anybody for a W-2 since the late 1970s. Wow. I've been a contract employee ever since. So all these jobs that I've had, I go in and I say, pay me an hourly wage, don't pay me sick leave, don't pay me benefits, don't pay me retirement. Just pay my hourly wage. And if I'm not, in the office, then don't pay me. And it's great because their eyes light up. I guess I've proven myself competent at these various labors. So I get away with it. Now I've lost my train of thought. What was I talking about? Good Lord, I always do this.
What you were writing before the Gunther series as a historian?
Yeah, of course I knew that all the time. I was just checking to see if you were listening. Very good. History. So obviously, after all this was done, what better than to practice what you learn? I wanted to sort of honor the people who thought they were wasting so much of their time instructing me in college by paying them back in kind. I'm sure much to their horror, but I had a good time traveling all over the United States, working on these history projects and writing books that got published by the University of Georgia Press and places like that. And so the question is, why the segue? Why Gunther? Why history to mystery? Well, you can lie in a mystery. One of the constraints of writing history books is that you encounter lovely people, fascinating people, alive and dead, but you're stuck because you gotta tell it as you find it. You hope it's the truth. It may not be the truth, but you're supposed to be writing the facts as a historian. And that can be quite frustrating. A number of people I encountered, long dead, but in the context of this history research, I'd go, oh, come on, you could have done so much more. It would have been so much sexier to write about. But instead you got caught and you died, or whatever, or you didn't get caught and you died. So I began to think, well, maybe I can apply all my history training, all the motivations that get me to write history books, and I can apply those to fiction. And that's exactly what I did, because to write history books, you do research, you travel. Well, guess what? For my mystery books, I do interviews, I travel. But if someone says, oh, you could have them do this, or you could have them do that, hey, nothing's stopping me. The facts don't matter anymore. So the segue was a continuum and a lot more fun. I didn't have to travel all over the United States and miss my family. I could stay pretty much within the confines of Vermont, which I adore. So it was a win-win, really, when it got back down to it. People have said, well, gosh, don't you want to write history books again? Absolutely not. Because in a funny way, that's what I'm doing now. I mentioned earlier that I write social anthropologies instead of history books, mystery books. And that's why, the Vermont that I just describe in these books is the real Vermont. I mean, it's out there.
Have you ever, Victoria asks, have you ever had any Vermonters who maybe are public figures tell you that they know that you might have based a character on them, or hinted that they wouldn't mind a character based on them?
The latter, absolutely. Oh God, yes. Oh, would you please put me in a book? Oh, I want to be someone truly evil,
Oh
or
God.
oh yes. Oh, and other people say, oh, feel free to kill me. I don't mind. That's good. Well, you laugh, but less the famous, because they're famous, so they don't need me. But every single book now has at least 5 to 10 character names who actually are real people. I've begun a process, and I almost hesitate to say because I don't want too many people to go crazy about this, but for years and years and years now, winners of auctions, and they're museums or hospitals or preservation societies or libraries, and they have auctions to raise money. And one of them came to me uncountable years ago and said, well, would you give us a hardback book? And I went, well, of course I'll give you a hardback book, but what's that going to get you? $20? Well, let's do something more playful. And I had heard through the grapevine, someone else did this. I don't make this up, but I said, well, why don't you auction off a character name? Now, thank God I thought ahead enough to say, I just want the name. I don't want your personality. I don't want to meet you. I don't want to put you in the book. I just want your name in the book. And I hope that's enough to entertain you. And you win your auction. You donate whatever money to this cause, and I'll be the prize. Joe, you appear in a Joe Gunther book. And I get to do anything I want with that name. Anything. You may not even be alive. You may start the book dead. Or you may be a perfectly heinous human being. Okay, you can't complain. That's that's the caveat. That's the buyer beware at the beginning, and it's never backfired. Everyone's taken it in a very heroic fashion, and they keep coming back for more. They get a big kick out of it, to the point where once I ended up with something like 12 names, which I just went, oh my God, what am I going to do? Put them in an elevator and cut them so they all die? Well, thank God we don't have very many elevators in Vermont, so I spared them that. But that got a little scary. I was sort of like, oh God, this is going to be the tail that wags the dog. I won't have a plot anymore. I'll just have a boat full of character names. But anyhow, we managed to get through that. But it's been delightful and great fun, and people walk up to me all the time and say, "Oh my God, I couldn't believe I ran across Bob's name in the book. Boy, that was fun." And so it's a sort of an inside joke. Yeah. And I guess word got out that I don't associate your personality with your name, so no one's feelings have ever gotten hurt. And these people are actually fairly perverse sometimes. They just I've heard little old ladies who turned into axe murderers in my books, and they're perfectly delighted. Takes all types, I guess.
Anne asks, do you write on a laptop or do you write by hand? And do you do a lot of drafts, or are the drafts mostly mental?
Well, I'm mental, all right. I'll give you that. But yes, I evolved. Being a man of a certain age, I began writing longhand. I wrote on legal pads with a pen. And with the invention of the very first portable computers, actually they were desktop computers. They were just light enough to lug around. And as happenstance came up, I happened to be a Macintosh. So So I started with Macintoshes, and I still have Macintoshes. I don't have a dog in that fight as to, PCs or Macs or whatnot. I just started there, and that's where I stayed. But that Macintosh had a 128K memory. I mean, there is nothing you can buy now with that small a memory. It just doesn't exist. Wristwatches, I don't care what it is. Your egg timer has more memory than my first computer did, which weighed God knows how much. And of course, I was still writing history books those days, and I would carry it on my shoulder, and I'm sure it
Oh
altered,
yeah, it came in that big old
my
backpack,
hand.
didn't it?
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah,
We
yeah.
had one of those growing up.
Oh sure, and
It
now
was
they've
my
all been
dad's first
converted.
computer.
Yeah, they've been converted into fish bowls now.
Yeah.
But so that's how I began. And the reason I did that, in answer to the question, was because when I write longhand, or used to write longhand, I am an editor. I began life as an editor. I used to be an editor in one of my previous lives. And uh, so I look at other people's work with a metaphorical or physical red pencil in my hand, as I do with my own work. I was actually helping someone not too terribly long ago, and gave him back a piece of work that he had asked me to look at. And I covered it with marks. And I could tell he was a little shocked. And I went, "Edward, don't think I'm playing favorites here." And I showed him a page from my own manuscript. And here, I'm an old dog. I mean, I've been doing this. I should be good at this. But when I showed him my latest page from my latest manuscript, and it was just as covered as his was, he began to feel a lot better. Because I have multiple obligations when I edit. And part of them has to do with accuracy. Part of them have to do with repetition, which is something certainly we Americans do too much of. Check your emails next time, and you'll find that certain pet phrases or words come up again and again and again and again. And last but not least, I set myself the ambition early on in life as a writer that the only times that I would interrupt the reader's enjoyment of my work would not be through a flaw I hadn't caught. It would be through a passage I wrote with such care that they paused a moment and went, "Ah, that was lovely. Has nothing to do with the plot, doesn't advance the action. It was just a piece of nice, carefully edited wording. A lovely paragraph about the weather."
Yeah, there's a lot of merit in the crafting of a sentence and the crafting of a paragraph that's not necessarily has to do with storytelling, but everything to do with the language and the beauty of the writing.
Right, right, right. And that's always been important to me. And I think that's one of the things that sustains me from book to book to book, when people go, "Oh, another Joe Gunther," but it's the introduction of, let's call it what it is, art, language art, in the midst of all the action and all the rest of it. Why not? I mean, this stuff is absolutely not brain candy. It is more than that. It is about us. It is culture. It is people stressed out. It is the world we inhabit. I mean, when was the last time you had a single day that was untouched by some form of fracas? Where you just kind of go, "Oh God, I didn't see that coming. The bloody washing machine just broke, and now my whole day has been, derailed." And it can obviously get worse and worse and worse from there. Well, I love to intersperse moments of smelling the roses, if you will, just to step back, take a breather, kind of go, "Oh, okay, a little artistic moment," and then we go back into it. So it's a balance.
Victoria asks, in your spare time, what authors do you like to read?
I read promiscuously. I read a lot, but you'll be surprised, maybe disappointed to hear that I don't read murder mysteries. I read history books. I read science books. I read stuff like that. Margot is always laughing at me because when I settled in after the day is done and we're reading, all my books are 700-800 pages, and they leave a dent in my chest. Those are the books I love, and she sort of glances over at the page and goes, God, how can you read that stuff? I'd be fast asleep in the first paragraph. But that's what keeps me going. And I think, yeah, obviously my background and my training is history and all of that I've already explained. But I think also that's my form of escape. I've already rattled off all the things I've done, and I have properly associated them with chaos and stress and loss and tension. Mm-hmm. What better thing to read about than 19th century European political history? Okay? It may mean many things, but currently it's not tension filled. And that allows me to get away from a life that is so full that my idea of a real horror, in a way, is curling up with a good murder mystery. That's the last thing I want to do. So I don't.
Folks, this is the last 5-10 minutes of our event. So if you have any burning questions, please feel free to ask in the little chat box. And again, if you would like to order a copy of the book for yourself, give us a call at any one of the stores, toadbooks.com. Archer, Kathy would like to say thank you for being a part of her family's tradition. She loves attending the annual Autumn Author Talk at the Toadstool in person and now virtually this year. You make Christmas a lot easier for Santa Claus, and you provide always for much enjoyed gift for her husband.
Now you know why I'm on Earth, Kathy, is to take care of your Christmas. Delighted.
And Anne also says, thank you so much for being here. But for the hours of pleasure provided by the 30 Joe Gunther novels to date. Oh my goodness. I have marbles in my mouth today, folks. Thank you very much for bearing with me.
All right. No, guys, I wouldn't be here without you. So this is truly a cooperative endeavor. Anyone who says that the writing occupation is one of isolation and solitude, it's complete bunk. These are collaborative works. You guys inform me. I do my best to keep you addicted to Joe Gunther. If I ever run out of spit or a career, it's because I've let you down. So you guys are why I write. So I thank you for your support and your help and your enthusiasm. All appreciated.
Archer, thank you so much for doing this with us. We look forward to your events in store every year, and every year I wish that I could listen to more of what you have to say. I'm very glad this year that I was able to give my full attention. I didn't have to run the register. It is such a joy hearing you talk about your books and your work, and your books are something special in and of themselves. It's not very often that I think we in this region are seen by the rest of the country, and I think these books give a nice little slice of life into what goes on here in New Hampshire, Vermont, Northern New England in general. It's very magical for us as the readers.
Well, you're very kind. Those are wonderful words to hear. Thank you.
Victoria would like to tell you she freely gives you permission to use her name in any
It's got to be an auction, Victoria.
All right, folks, if there's no more questions, I'm going to wrap that up because that is an hour.
Indeed.
Thank you so much. This has been so much fun for me.
Oh, entirely my pleasure. Bye-bye, everybody.
Have a great night. Thank you all for coming.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.